Hello and welcome to the only podcast that got into a fender bender with our dead lesbian friend's car, or as we call it in Star Wars, a Galen Herso. I'm Luke.
I'm Max.
I'm Matt.
And this is Force for Thought.
Trump's America, you know?
There's so many moving parts to these. I'm never going to be able to get it in time. All right. Hello and welcome back. Thanks for joining. Today we're talking about... I don't know.
Why'd you say that so vindictively, like
Yeah,
they
you're-
didn't last week or something like that?
Are you
I look
talking
at
to
the
someone
analytics.
specific?
I know. Anyone who's watching now probably didn't watch our episode last week, and yeah, I'm bitter about it. Because it was a good
Or are you
episode.
talking to me since I wasn't here last week? Also, yeah, I'm glad that Jake finally blew the lid off of your secret that you are poo bearing it from the waist down.
Every time.
That's good for the podcast's self-esteem, though, that last week was ill received because they like us. They didn't watch when it was different.
Yeah, Matt wasn't there. He's the glue.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. It's like they can't recast me. Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer.
But no, I don't know why I said it like that. That episode's actually doing fine. But still listen to it because it was a fun talk. But anyway, today we're doing a look back at 2024 and we're looking ahead at some of the stuff that's going to be coming out in 2025, which I'm excited about. We did it last year, so it only felt appropriate that we do it again, even though we're kind of like a month late to doing this episode. But other stuff came up because it was Skeleton Crew, and then we had to get that Serial Karn episode out of our system, and then Matt was out of town.
Yeah.
I think we were late last year, too.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. We also didn't. It's funny because like we did this last year, but then we also didn't do half the things we did last year this year. Like we didn't do the Thanksgiving,
all the holiday ones.
New Year's. Yeah.
A lot of those were really one and dones, though. It's hard to get new content for some of those. Unlike this year, we're doing a Valentine's episode all about the love in Star Wars. So
We love love.
But Matt is back from his work
Hello,
trip
everybody.
at Sundance. So Matt, I thought you
Yes,
could
everyone's
start
like,
by
Ooh, never
telling us all
leave.
about that.
Everyone, you guys were like, "Oh, Matt's gone on PTO," which was hilarious. It like gets me every single time. I also like that you told Jake that you had that. Hopefully, he has bad opinions, so you could argue about it. That made me very happy as well.
Yes, and Max was clear to back him up no matter what.
Yes. That's what best friends do. But yeah, no, I was at Sundance Film Festival for work, which was great. I saw a lot of weird movies. It's fun to see. Like, I went to 5 world premieres, which was really fun. I saw a lot of celebrities. Met Conan O'Brien, Io Adebri, Tan France, a bunch of others as well. And so it was super nice. I felt important, which is a rarity.
Nice.
But no, it was great. And I literally just like left the house at 8 a.m. and got back at 10 p.m. every night. I saw like a midnight screening that lasted until 2 in the morning. I don't suggest that above the age of 30 anymore. But no, it was a blast. So it was super nice to be out in Utah. I've never been to Utah before, and so yeah, it was my first time at Sundance as well. A lot of fun things, and the weather not nearly as bad as I thought.
Good.
Yeah. What? Follow-up questions?
No, I just realized I have no idea where Salt Lake City is. Because they have snow there, but they also have mountains. Is that like a... Are they south?
We're literally... they're literally in... So I was in Park City. I had to fly into Salt Lake, and then you drive about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to Park City, which is like literally on a mountain. And they're debating moving Sundance. They have a contract for 1 more year, and they are either between Salt Lake City, keeping in Park City, going to Boulder, Colorado, or Cincinnati, Ohio, which is apparently the front runner.
Wow.
And would, I
That'd be
assume,
cool.
tank the festival. Because I don't think Park City is just like the wealthiest town I've ever been in. It's so small and secluded, and like you could just feel the wealth. Like it just is like everything is so nice and neat that like most people I assume go that are like hedge fund bros or like people that are like studio execs are going to see films or presumably also skiing and reaping those benefits. And I feel like you've been to Cincinnati, like we live 2 to 4 hours north of Cincinnati, and I don't want to go to Cincinnati.
No.
It is a
Step child of
satisfactory
Ohio.
city.
Yeah, I mean, their airport's not even in the same state.
Well, I obviously hope they go to Cincinnati because that would be cool. But it definitely seems like
Yeah.
something that would fit in Boulder, Colorado. That sounds right.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, it was a blast. Any follow-up questions?
Nope.
I don't know if you're just asking him to be nice.
No, I just wanted to get into looking back at 2024, some of the things that have come out, including between the three of us, 4 children, which is exciting.
Yes.
All in the span
Yay.
of about 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah, it was absolute insanity. But yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy, crazy year. So I feel like the podcast is always a blast, but has taken a back seat sometimes just because well, that's not true because we've like literally, I mean, it is for me, but we've also been able to like bulk up a bunch of episodes. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of babies now.
Yeah,
How would
I
you
am
rank them?
enormously proud that we have not missed a week for the podcast during all of that.
Yeah,
That took some
that's
doing.
true. It did. We and like for us who were pretty busy schedules and stuff. I feel like I moved between a move, 4 babies,
A new job.
health scares left and right, new jobs. Yeah, well, I mean like literal health scares left and right all 2024 as well.
Yeah. I'm saying this so that our fans understand that they don't appreciate us nearly enough as they should, but
Yeah, I was gonna say 2 out of the 3 of us have heart problems. We won't say who. I'm sure we have not mentioned it before.
but just as important as all of our children, Bad Batch season 3 came out as well.
And it was great.
It was great. I
Yeah,
loved it.
I can't believe it's
I have a lot of
Yeah.
thoughts on it that I'm going to save some of the minutia for when we review our Bad Batch season 3 review, but overall it was fantastic. It was a good little cap to the Clone Wars / Bad Batch saga. Could have done a little bit of a better job
Yeah.
bridging the gap to Rebels, in my opinion, but it was very good. I loved it.
Mhm. There was
Overall, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say this year was crazy. How much Star Wars content there actually was in comparison to when we first started out. Doing this podcast, I felt like it was basically Mandalorian and I think maybe Andor as well. But I feel
Yeah.
like it's been very odd because 2024 was such a big year for Star Wars and the fact that we had everything we're going to talk about. So I'm not going to name names yet. But it for some reason felt like less intense than it did like when Mandalorian season 3 was out. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. 'Cause I just feel like
Yeah.
it was a lot going on, and yet I'm just like none of it was as impactful as I wanted it to be. I don't think. Not to be a negative about it. It was a blast every step of the way, but it was just like, oh yeah, like a lot happened, and I just feel like I'm like, okay, but what's next? And I felt like after Andor, Mandalorian season 3, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm good for a minute. Like I need to watch this over and over again. Not to get negative again. That sounds pretty negative, but
Yeah, it was a medium to poor year for the Star Wars community, I'd say. The reaction to the Acolyte, obviously. The
Yeah.
reaction to Skeleton Crew was good, but not enthusiastic.
I know, which is
Um,
weird.
And I'd say the same for the reaction to Bad Batch season 3. Like the people that watched it loved it, but it was just a kind of a low year for Star Wars from like a macro perspective for like the
Yeah,
typical fan. For us, I mean, I had a great year in Star Wars, and it's like it wasn't a bad year for Star Wars fans because the bar is so unbelievably low given how awful 2018 was as a Star Wars fan after The Last Jedi. So yeah, like looking back at it from that lens, it's one of the less remarkable years for Star Wars, unfortunately. But in terms of just the content and my experience with it and our podcast and my relationship to Star Wars, 2 thumbs up. I had a great
the
year.
podcast has been my favorite part of Star Wars, but I think it's hard to beat when you're interacting with your friends on a weekly basis.
I know. It's also very nice to
I'm
like
biased.
really focus on what we like about Star Wars and like talk about it so formally, because I feel like also a lot of Star Wars fans just like maybe didn't watch all of the Acolyte because of the backlash, or didn't watch
Yeah.
Skeleton Crew because it didn't look that interesting and no returning characters or anything. But having this podcast and the community the good part of the community that I like to involve myself in, it's really easy to enjoy Star Wars and really focus on that.
Absolutely. Well, I guess since we mentioned it, let's also talk about Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, because Luke, I feel like you kind of hit the nail on the head that it was just kind of from a macro perspective, a little meh. Acolyte, definitely some high highs and some low lows. Skeleton Crew, I feel like the farther removed I get from it, the more I recognize that it's probably one of the best made Star Wars shows. Maybe better than
Yep.
Mandalorian. It's
I
just
would
it's just for a
1000%
certain
agree with that.
demographic. It was just trying to do
Yeah.
something very specific that, like you said, Luke, like a lot of people were just interested in it, so a lot of people didn't watch it. But those who did, I feel like all have the same reaction. Like, yeah, that was a really good story.
I mean,
Yep.
and rightfully so. Like, not everything has to be the catch-all blockbuster event of the season, because
Mhm.
we're well past the event of the year now. There's something every couple months, and we're developing more of a niche for each individual story. And as long as they keep making good stories, like, I don't think Skeleton Crew performed poorly, but those numbers are all made up and adjusted 1,000 times before any public record of them is made. So who knows? But I don't know. I think it went well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys?
I agree. Sorry, Max, go on.
No, you go.
I was gonna say I feel like Star Wars. I think a lot of people watch it because it is like going to be an eventized thing, right? That's what people like miss about it. I think, and that's why right. I think we all miss that theater experience as well when it is a big event, and kind of. I feel like these shows work a lot better when they're tied around these big events. When you're like, oh, the new trilogy's coming out, this new set of films are coming out, and so you can kind of be like, oh, it still is this massive event, but we also have these little sprinkles throughout the year that are these shows, that are these one-off stories potentially that we also love. I think that's when it can really work well. I think Star Wars has been setting itself up for massive success in that regard. Like, I'm excited for when the next set of movies come out. I think that's going to almost feel more fulfilling, but they're laying the groundwork. I don't think they could have done that off the jump. So I am really excited to see more of these macro stories, almost like in the fact of like, oh yeah, Skeleton Crew. It's a one-off, potentially. It's 8 episodes. It's a lot of fun. So just enjoy it. And I don't think we're going to, consistently analyze everything to death. But I think that these are going to feel more minimal when these films are coming out. And then those are the good things we're going to be harkening on. And then we're going to just be able to enjoy the show. Like, Mandalorian Season 3 would not be nearly as disappointing, and I'm using that, like, very lightly because it wasn't necessarily disappointing. It's just in comparison.
In comparison
But
to
if
some
you-
people.
And yes, in comparison to 2 out of 3 of us right now, I'd say. But, like, if you're, just like the heart problem. But I think I think that wouldn't be disappointing nearly as much if we're having these films and we're being Mandalorian is just kind of that fun little extra Star Wars we get throughout the year, and then we focus and harken on the films. Anyway,
To be fair,
Yeah,
you're
that's all I
saying
was
Mandalorian 3 compared to seasons 1 and 2.
correct. Yes.
Luke, you don't
Yes,
disagree
that's
with
how
that.
I understood it
Yeah.
as well.
But you don't disagree with that. I mean, you recognize season 3 is the least of the two, but not because it's necessarily a bad season. Seasons 1 and 2 were just phenomenal.
I know, but just calling it disappointing just because it's not as good as the first couple. Like,
But I was
Return of the
using that
Jedi
as
is
an
not
example.
disappointing just because it's the worst of the original trilogy.
But
It's
that's what
still a really good
disappointing
movie
is,
in its
though.
own right. It's just different.
That's true. I agree with that. I don't find Return of the Jedi disappointing, but that's the thing. Maybe
But that's because
I
that's
do
the best
find
one of the
Mandalorian
sequel, the
Season 3.
trilogy.
Yes, I do keep forgetting that.
No, that's exactly what disappointing means, is you're comparing it to the things that came before it. I mean, it's like if you had, just the other night, Laura and I went out to dinner, and we had this phenomenal lobster bisque soup for our appetizer, and then the meals came out. We were at an Italian restaurant, and it was some sort of chicken and pasta, and it was just okay. And I would say it was disappointing, only because the appetizer knocked my socks off.
But you know what's so funny is that, like, I just don't. When I watch the original trilogy, I'm never like, oh man, Return of the Jedi just isn't as good as the other two. I'd be like, oh, that was just a different flavor. But when I watched Mandalorian, I was like, season 3 isn't as good as season 1 and 2. Is that weird? I don't know. That's just
That is
how
weird because
view
I
those.
feel the exact same way about watching the original trilogy as I do watching Mandalorian, where the third one is worse, but not in a disappointing way. It's just different, and I'm okay with that.
I think the differences, though, is that what I actively dislike, like Lizzo and Jack Black. I know that's low hanging fruit, and I'm sorry to even bring that up. I feel like that's not fair, almost.
It's the reason it's not fair is because you have little to no other things to complain about in Mandalorian season 3, and you just love talking about how much you don't like Mandalorian season 3 because of that one moment.
No, I mean, I would love to go into more depth about it.
Calorie
too,
Beck was
but-
introduced in season 3, Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, but that's, but even that's a moment. Kelleran Beck, very cool, but I mean, I don't think that's a savior of the show.
I would say he's a moment in the same way that Lizzo and Jack Black are a moment. I think they should at least cancel each other out if you're.
I mean, they're in the entire episode for quite a long time.
Kelleran Beck saved Grogu and then flew him through Coruscant.
In a moment, yes. He did that, yes. A lot of that was implied.
Oh my god, Matthew, don't make me go through and record the screen time for each of them. I'll fucking do it.
The beautiful thing
Please,
of this
honestly,
conversation
do
is
it.
that this mirrors one of our first episodes so beautifully when we were trying to distinguish the difference between a scene and a moment.
Oh my god, yeah, you're right.
Or it was best
Yeah,
line.
we did that.
When we were doing the best lines. We were trying to distinguish the best line from the best moment.
I thought you were talking
Yeah,
about our first episode when we talked about Mandalorian season 3 and had this conversation.
Anyway, that was in 2023, I think, so it doesn't
Yeah, that
matter.
wasn't even
So we're
2024.
talking
That has nothing to
2020.
do with what we're
Yeah.
talking about now.
It doesn't.
Do you guys think we're going to see... I want to say the characters from Skeleton Crew, but I feel like there's no way we're going to see, like, the kids again. I don't know why. I feel like it's just
Yeah.
more likely that we'll see Jod Najawood again. Do you think that we'll see Jod again?
Yes. I think
I
there's a
hope so.
100% chance we'll see Jod again. I think that there is a 90% chance we'll see the kids again. In a long enough timeline, every single character is going to come back. And I wanted to talk about this when we were talking about Bad Batch. Like the impact on returning characters is really all it seems that the heads at Disney think they have going at Star Wars, because that is consistently the most hyped up and maybe not well received, but profitable moments in Star Wars, with the Kenobi show and the Ahsoka show, and like bringing back Bo-Katan and Ahsoka and Mandalorian season 2. Those are all, and Thrawn. And Thrawn, they did it multiple times, because that put like Star Wars Rebels on the map back in 2017 when they brought him in for season 3. And then they did it again when they brought him into Legend. So they did it in Rebels when they brought him from Legends into animation. Then they did it again when they brought him from animation into live action. And now the well is running dry. Like, I'm hearing news that The Mandalorian season 4, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, whatever you want to call it, is going to have Rada the Hutt, which we talked about how Jeremy Allen White, is that his name, is going to be playing him, and that's weird. But we really just glossed over how weird it is to be bringing back Rada the Hutt, because on the one hand, he's a Hutt, and there's a story to be told there with how the Hutt, like the War of the Bounty Hunters, the Hutt crime syndicate kind of fell apart and was solidified under Jabba's rule, and then Jabba died, and now where is it? It's probably with his son, so that all makes sense, and I'm sure I'm going to like it. But also, it's just bringing back a character from animation that you want the fan base to get really excited about, to see him in live action, because you've had such good returns on that before. But now it's like we're just doing it with Rada the Hutt and Embo, and I'm excited to see Embo, but like you gotta make more animation if you want us to get really excited about seeing this time and time again. And now that well has run dry, I think we're gonna start seeing other characters brought back and treated like, big monumental things. Like the Rey movie now is going to be released in 2028, if at all, and by then it'll be 9 years removed from the last time we saw Rey, and so it'll be a big moment. And similarly, I think that's how they will treat it when they bring back Jod soon, in the next couple years, I assume, and then also the kids when they're adults, or even when they're old people, however they want to do it. I'm sure they will come back.
Yeah, I don't think you can sign Jude Law necessarily into a Star Wars universe. I could be wrong. Without some sort of plan. Either this is 8 episodes and that's all we're going to want you for, or hey, we're going to sign you up for multiple things, right? Like, maybe he'll be in The Mandalorian and Grogu. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of different opportunity for him to be able to show up. I don't think that... I think Skeleton Crew is a jumping off point in retrospect when you look back. And be like, oh, this is a fun way to introduce these characters. Anyway, now here they are somewhere else. Again, maybe not the kids, but...
I hope so, and I hope the Mandalorian and Grogu movie is a significant advancement of the galaxy and the lore and everything that's going on at the time, because every single thing I hear about it just gives irrelevant side story energy.
Yeah.
I don't care about Rada the Hutt.
I know. We have to set our expectations clear that this is just Mandalorian season 4. Don't let them pull a curtain over your eyes having you see it in the movie theater. It's just the Mandalorian season 4. They had already written it and then turned it into a movie.
They're putting out a movie. I expect a movie. My expectations are
agree.
heightened.
I think that's what they said. I think they said that themselves too, is that you have to the stakes are different, right? I'm pretty sure they were talking about that. How like you
I've heard
need
them
a
say
movie
that.
experience.
So
Yeah,
hopefully
like,
season 4 was just so grand that they were like, we can't dump this in a season 4 of a TV show. This clearly needs to be a standalone thing.
we can't give
For-
them the slop we did with season 3. I'm
If
sorry,
history
I'm just
tells
kidding.
us anything, the story really takes off 2 seasons after you wrap it up.
Yes. This is- yeah.
That's funny.
Anyway, I also want to go back to Acolyte too. So, do you
Mhm.
hold
Oh,
the
yeah.
odds of seeing Chimere again just as high as seeing Jodna Jawwood?
Yes. Yes,
In
I
what
do.
capacity?
Not as high as Jodna Jawwood, because I think that'll be soon. Chimere, it could be 5, 10, 15 years, and
in
I
something
wouldn't
live
be
action
surprised.
or in a book?
Something live action. I mean, a book, I think there's a 100% chance for every single Star Wars character.
Yeah, I
but
agree.
live action,
I don't
I
know.
am certain we'll see Chimere again. And Osha and May again. Well, I mean, I'm not as excited to see Osha and May again as I am Chimere, but their stories are intertwined, and I'm sure that they will not just drop them, given how seemingly and allegedly ill-received they were. They're still part of that story, and that's the story going forward that people want to see. A lot of people want to see still.
How
You say that they could be in a book, but as long as Mace Windu's around, we never know. That he might just gobble up all the real estate.
All the book and comic real estate, because they just keep
Yeah.
writing about him when no one
Yep.
wants that.
But no, I agree. I think Chimere. I hope they do because, like I said, stick to your guns. I feel like we say that a lot of the time. Like even if people don't like the acolyte, maybe it's the content they're in. It's not necessarily the characters. Let's see those characters in a different perspective. I think that'd be. We spent 8 episodes with them, right? It was 8 episodes, correct? Or so we spent
8.
8
Yeah.
episodes, right? So I mean, I would like to see them finish something off with them. Even like we jump in time to see Chimere and Osha now, at their full power or something. Just in some sort of way. Like I don't care if there's a time jump. Like again, let's pay them off. But at the same time, we're still kind of holding on hope for Solo 2 aspects, whatever that means. So it's a weird mixed bag because I feel like sometimes they're like we need to introduce these people, and then other times I feel like they're just like, well, that we can give away for some reason. Like to me, it's like Solo 2 wasn't necessarily like received poorly. It was just wasn't received as well. Where like Acolyte was like received poorly again. Obviously, I think wrongfully so in the amount. Maybe I don't know. It's a mixed bag. I think I don't want to get into that necessarily, but like, it's weird to be like, oh, this one thing that didn't even wasn't received that terrible is just not going to be ever seen again, which is odd. So I feel like it is a mixed bag still of what they're going to do or what they really want, or honestly their standards as they kind of are in this like rebirth I don't know, stage of Disney right now.
I think that's because
The
Lucasfilm just has an absolutely terrible job of trying to distinguish between what worked and what didn't work. So they have this bad
Yeah.
habit of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where it's like, oh, we're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole now. Like,
Yes.
the example I always go to is the Book of Boba Fett, because I did not care for the Book of Boba Fett, but I absolutely loved Cobb Vanth and Cad Bane. And I think every single
Mhm.
person who watched it really loved Cobb Vanth and Cad Bane. And every single person would
Yeah.
love to see more Cobb Vanth and Cad Bane content. But I don't think that's ever going to happen.
We already had more Cobb Vanth content in Mandalorian season. No, we didn't. Excuse me. I think that's absolutely going to happen though for both of them. I think Cobb Vanth will absolutely be in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, and
Yeah.
Cad Bane will be in something soon. The last thing I want to say about the Acolyte, I've made it very clear my staunch defense of the Acolyte over the last 7 or 8 months. But the thing that really bothers me now that we're more removed from it, I was on IMDb looking up something the other day, and the first review I saw was complaining that they completely retconned established lore, and no, they didn't. I'm sick and fucking tired of everyone saying that, and I keep hearing it, that Anakin is supposed to be the only one born of the Force. It is well established that Darth Plagueis was so wise and so powerful that he could manipulate the midichlorians to create life, and this is the backstory to that. Anakin was created by the Force. Osha and May were not created by the Force. The Mother Anastasia manipulated the midichlorians to create them. That's different. And I'm so sick of it. That's not a valid criticism. If you want to complain about the acting and the writing, I won't agree with you, but I'll understand it. And like when people complain about The Last Jedi and they're like, oh, Luke shouldn't have died. I'm like, I think you're wrong, but I understand why you think that. And this one, no, you're wrong and you're an idiot for thinking it. And I'm tired of you saying it.
Well, that's the problem with trying
agree.
to
Go
be
Luke.
honest about these things, is that I feel like my opinion on the Acolyte seemingly changes drastically depending on the crowd that I'm talking to. Because I feel like when
Same.
I'm on this podcast, it probably sounds like I'm very critical of it. Yet when I'm commenting online, it sounds like I'm shilling for them just because of exactly what you said. Every single argument is so disingenuous. And I'm like, look,
Mhm.
guys, there is a lot of stuff there that you can like legitimately critique and stuff. But bitching about the age of Kiadi Mundi is just the dumbest shit in the world.
That's
Like,
not
I'm
it, yeah.
so tired of that. So yes, I 100% agree with you, Luke.
And no matter how bad you can convince me that the writing and the acting is, it still has 4 of the best 6 lightsaber fights in all of Star Wars. The
Yeah.
fight choreography was so unbelievably amazing, and I will always love that show for that, and even if nothing else.
I agree. There's so many elements that I hate when people complain about certain things. Like you were just saying, Luke. Obviously, like when obviously if people have dumb arguments for like you said, Anakin versus like the writing and like actually critiquing the show. I was rewatching The Terminator today for work. Not rewatching. I guess I was scrolling through for scenes for work. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Terminator or when the last time you saw it was, but in that movie, there's just randomly a Arnold Schwarzenegger puppet where he takes his eye out. Like he clearly is a puppet, like a full body puppet that they is in it for 2 minutes, and it's like that is bad looking, but we still love that movie. Like everyone loves that movie still, and it's like yeah, the Acolyte has amazing fight scenes, so at least you can take that away, like if nothing else. And it just drives me up a wall when nobody can see anything, or like we have some friends that'll only be like, oh, and then the choreography was so bad, and it's just like, well, it's like it's everyone's perspective of what that means, but it's like it's hard to say that this was bad, the choreography and the Acolyte. Like it genuinely was thrilling and fantastic the entire time.
I didn't even think people were saying that. I would lose my mind if I heard someone say that.
Oh yeah, they were saying it. I saw that online too. But that's what they say
Oh.
about that's what they've always been saying. But the thing is, The Last Jedi is what I'm thinking of. The throne room scene. The people always point that one out too. Like, oh, the choreography and that is
Yeah.
so terrible. And it's like, okay, but the people who are saying this praise the prequels, and I'm like, I promise you, if you just go back and rewatch the Duel of the Fates and you analyze that lightsaber battle the same way that you
Mhm.
analyze these, it does not hold up to the standard that you think it does. Like, it's all nonsense.
No.
It's not realistic, but it's fantasy. Like, suspend your disbelief and
Yeah.
enjoy the content. It's awesome. But yeah, I
Yeah,
saw
there's
that.
there's
People
no
were-
realistic way that you could have a lightsaber fight with 2 people against 1 person. Even if that 1 person had a double-bladed lightsaber, that realistically that fight ends in 1 moment. There's no way that they can actually block 2 blows at one time. Like you
Yeah.
know where
It's just because they have a nostalgic connection to it.
yeah.
And that's the only reason why it's good, because they remember it being good. And it's like, well, now you're a shitty adult who like has the internet and now you can bitch about it.
Literally, because 26 years ago, when the movie came out, all the adults online were being bitches about it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, literally.
And
it's-
us who were growing
history-
up and
history
swinging
repeats
sticks at
itself.
each other on the playground, we're like, I don't know, I thought it was pretty sick.
I like the color green. Like I feel like that was
And then we had a couple surprises this year too, which I also wanted to talk about as far as the upcoming year. Tales of the Empire. That one was kind of released
Mhm.
or announced and released pretty quickly, right? Because that was dropped on May
Yeah.
the 4th, and I think it was announced like in
Mhm.
April. So
hmm
I don't know what else coming out this year, but I'm hoping to get something like that.
I,
Uh,
agree. I mean, almost definitely will, especially for me. I feel like that's almost a tradition now, where it's like, oh, Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, Visions randomly.
When
no,
did Tales of
that
the
is the
Jedi-
tradition.
Yeah,
It's in 2022 Tales of the Jedi came out, and then 23 in 23 was in 2021 Visions 1 came out, in 22 Tales of the Jedi came out, in 23 Visions 2 came out, and then in 24 Tales of the Empire. So this year they've already announced that Visions 3 will be coming out, and Star Wars Celebration is in Japan, and that's a week before May the 4th, and I'm sure they're going to have a big to-do about it there. So we will be getting Star Wars Vision Season 3 probably on May the 4th again, because that's been
Yeah.
the pattern so far. So hopefully that means we'll get a Tales of something in 2026, which I'd love to talk about theories one day. Not really on topic for this exact episode right now. I'm talking about 2025, especially because none of us watch Star Wars Visions, right?
No.
I'm not into anime. I'd love to,
I
but
dabbled and I just
Yeah.
it's just I don't know. It's not my thing. I'm sure it's amazing.
I still don't
Same.
understand the canonicity of it, and that's a big barrier. to entry
yeah,
for
that
me.
is. And again,
is not
that's not a
canon.
complaint, but then it's like, what's the point now? It's like,
oh, well, they can do things that aren't canon that's still fun.
They can, and I don't want to say
know.
this as a bad thing on Visions, because obviously, if anyone watches Visions and they take something positive away from that, more power to them. But to me, that's just a big barrier to entry, where I'm just like, do I really want to sit down and watch this? Because in the head, I'm just like, does it really matter? I don't know. It's
Yeah.
a fine line, because I understand that the Star Wars universe isn't real, but there's a difference in my head between the real Star Wars and the not real Star Wars. It's the
Yeah,
same
like we
thing
talked
with
about, it's
Legends books.
history.
I hear all these things about all these legend stories, and I'm like, oh, that's so crazy. I should read that. But then I'm just like, but why? It's not real anymore.
Mhm.
That also brings up the Lego Star Wars series that came out this year, which the only one I can think of is
Mhm.
Rebuild the Galaxy. But that was great. It's also not canon, so I guess you probably didn't watch it. But it was really, really fun. I liked it.
And that makes sense though, because that one's like funny, right? It's like a comedy, so I understand. That's like to
Mhm.
me that at least has more draw to it. So I'm like, I would be more willing to watch that one. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's not canon.
Imagine if you liked anime as much as you like comedies.
You know,
There are people like that, so that's the draw.
Mm.
I'm not saying I don't
Impossible,
understand, but
though.
I get it. It's just not for me. All right, moving on to books. We had some good books drop this year, including The Living Force, which we all read, and I think we really liked it. We haven't talked about it yet. We haven't done our review, but
Yeah.
it was a good little story about all the members of the Jedi Council during the Phantom Menace era, because it takes place immediately before the Phantom Menace. And I liked it. Well, you get to see a little snippet of every
Wait.
single one of them.
Didn't we talk about it briefly? We didn't do an episode, but didn't we cram our not review, but didn't we talk about the Living Force?
I mean, we
in
probably
a
talked about it.
We
segmented
mentioned
episode?
it multiple times.
I
We were talking
still
about how it's a
don't.
comedy.
Yeah, because we did talk about how it was a comedy, because that really
Yeah.
helped my understanding of the book, because it like reframed a lot of stuff. I was like, oh, that was
Yes.
actually really funny then, if that's a comedy. And
I feel like
I ended
it
up
needs,
liking
like,
the
a
book a lot
trailer.
more. Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, that's what I'm in for. All right, cool.
Also came out was the Glass Abyss. I just finished listening to that one. That one I didn't care for as much. That's another one that we were just talking about, where it was more Mace Windu content. Not a character that particularly grabs me, but also just not a character that you get to see a whole lot, kind of the mindset of. So I don't know. It was a fun story. It was taking place on a cool planet called Metagos, which was really well built out, and very descriptive. And the villain named Chulak was also a really cool, compelling character. To me, it should have been more of a comic book, just because it sounded like it was a lot more visual. Like the visuals they were creating in my mind was really cool, and it was a lot of action. So very action based. I think it would have been better served as a comic. But the Glass Abyss, it wasn't bad. Not my favorite. I would put it towards the bottom of my list to the middle of the road as far as Star Wars books go.
Where do you listen to those on as well?
Libby?
Libby, presented by Overdrive. Also check out Canopy, the streaming service version of Libby.
I'm editing that out unless we get paid for that for that plug.
Oh, I get paid for that plug. Does that help? It's wrapped up in the salary.
All right, we'll keep it in. We'll keep it.
Sorry, I was really hoping it was Libby for that setup, but that worked out.
If I said like one of your competitors or something, you bastard. There was also a lot of High Republic books. Luke, did you read any of them? There was quite a bit. Temptation of the Force, Defy the Storm, Tears of the Nameless.
Yes, I read 3 of those. Let me pull it up. I read Defy the Storm and Tears of the Nameless are the YA books. I read Defy the Storm, and I talked about it briefly before, it was one of my lesser favorite High Republic books.
That's our favorite.
Because yeah,
I like
it,
the way
it
you
didn't
phrased it.
have as much Jedi content, which is really my jam, as you guys know. But Temptation of the Force did have a lot of Jedi content, and I liked that one a lot more. It was also probably one of my lesser favorite. I mean, you know how much I like the High Republic, and so of the, well, I guess so there are 3 in the first phase that I like all of them more than Temptation of the Force, and I like the first one in this phase, the Eye of Darkness, more than Temptation of the Force, but I still like it better than the prequels, the Phase 2 adult books that I also didn't care for that much. And then Tempest Breaker I'm listening to right now, and I'm so mad at myself because in Phase 1 I was so into it, and I was reading all the comics and all the books and all the audio dramas as they released, and the interconnectivity was so satisfying. But now with all my kids and life just getting busier, I haven't been able to keep up as much. I've been really trying to cram everything in before the High Republic ends in June in this year. It's coming to a conclusion, and I'm super excited for it. And I'm caught up on most everything except for the comics. And now Tempest Breaker, I am unclear how much of it is recapping the comics and how much of it is like expanding on where the comics went. Because I read the first like 3 or 4 of this this comic series, and so I know where it was going. And now Tempest Breaker is like talking about issues probably 13, 14, 15, and I'm like, oh, that's where that went, and oh, that character came back. And it's like such a bummer because it would have been so cool if I experienced it the way I'm sure it was written and meant to be experienced, and I'm just not, which is a real bummer. But I'm still excited to be along for the ride, and hopefully I'll be caught up on everything before the final book, The Trials of the Jedi, comes out in June, and I can experience that fully.
I'm excited for you to experience that in general, just because I feel like we've all been along for your ride. Weirdly, like we're like, oh, you're the resident High Republic expert. Also, I saw on the outline for this episode, HR. I quickly realized it was High Republic, but I was also like, oh my god, like what like stupid like HR joke are we doing today?
We've added the human resources department to our podcast. We needed it after Luke's last attempt at an intro joke.
Which you can find here.
We'll put it on our Patreon.
That's good Patreon content, yeah.
Are the High Republic novels standalone novels? Because I do want to go back and read them at some point. But I feel like when I hear about all the interconnectedness, I'm like, how much do I actually have to read?
Yeah, you have to read quite a bit. You can read the first one, obviously. The first
Light
one
of
is
the
a
Jedi?
great... Yeah, and that's one of the better ones, too. And then the second and third one are also probably my second and third favorites. The third one's my first favorite, actually. But yeah, that first trilogy is fantastic. And then you can skip all of Phase 2 and then just pick up again. So there's 5 adult books, but in Phase 3, the current phase now, it seems to be taking a lot more from the YA books than the first wave did, and it seems to be like they're all coming together into just one story, which is great for me, but also makes me feel like maybe you will have to read some of the YA books too, which are just as good, don't get me wrong.
There's only 5 adult novels?
7. 2 of them are prequels that I don't think you have to read.
From Phase 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought they were doing 3 in each. I thought each phase had
Phase,
like 3
Phase
waves.
2 was smaller. Phase 2 only had 2 waves. Phase 2 was smaller.
Interesting.
Luckily, because I did not like Phase 2 nearly as much.
But Phase 1 and Phase 3 have 3 waves.
Yes.
And each wave
People
has
say
one
Star
novel,
Wars is
one
confusing.
young adult,
And 1 middle grade.
one
Yes.
middle grade. Interesting. Yeah, I need someone to put together a list of just like the essentials in order to get the most by doing the least.
Well, I
Yeah.
have good news for you. That person is in front of you, and he is your brother.
But I feel like I need to do
It's-
something.
It's really hard to judge like the payoff of like if you read this 400 page book, you'll enjoy this book 10% more. But if you read this 100 page book, you'll enjoy this book 30% more. But the 100 page book is a middle grade book, and you might not like it as much. There's a lot of moving pieces about what I would recommend and what I wouldn't, because it
Tell
is
me if I'm wrong.
certainly too long to just recommend all of it.
but you were talking about
If-
potentially going through and. Sorry, Max. Go on. You were going to say it was actually important, probably.
I want to encourage Luke to actually make that, because the way you phrase that makes a lot of sense to me. If you can put down every single novel and just all the tie-ins and how much as a percentage it would increase my enjoyment of that book, that would be
We've
That would
seen
be
you at a
interesting.
spreadsheet. You're a master at spreadsheets, and you also said that you would go through and see the screen time of Jack Black versus Keller and Beck. So I feel like this is right up your alley to figure out.
This
All we need to
is.
do is argue with you. I feel like, and then I feel like you'll be like, "I'm doing this, you son of a bitch."
so long as we back Luke into a corner and make him feel like he's losing an argument, we can really get him to do just about anything.
Yeah, that's true.
This year we
That's
also
how I paid
had,
my house off.
we also had some comics. The Star Wars 2020 ongoing, which takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Jedi, has wrapped, and they've started moving on to post Jedi. They're doing the Battle of Jakku, or I think they just finished doing the Last Stand Battle of Jakku kind of mini series. I don't know if it's still a mini series, if it's like 12 issues. But then they just recently announced the next ongoing Star Wars series, which will take place post Battle of Jakku, which I'm really excited for, because I think that's a timeline
Mhm.
that's ripe for exploring with these characters, Han, Leia, Luke, to see what they were doing. Whereas I like the Star Wars comics, but they're really, kind of put into a tight bind as far as how much they can explore, but specifically
Mhm.
between the events of Empire and Jedi. So I'm very excited for it, but I'm more so just happy that the 2020 series wrapped and we can kind of move on to some other stories.
Yeah, I didn't read the 2020 series. I did read the first like 10 or 20 issues, and I was liking it because that's Charles Soule. He's one of our favorites. But I didn't keep up with it. I am also excited to see this era a lot more than in between episodes 5 and 6 or in between episodes 4 and 5. Like that's fun, but it's not really something I have a thirst for like I do this era.
Right. And then, I guess, speaking of that era, we also had a video game come out, Star Wars Outlaws, which also takes place between episode 5 and 6. And that's just, it's a tight window in order to draw people's attention. And I feel like the
Mhm.
video game definitely suffered because of that. Because from everything that I heard, it was not that it wasn't well received, it's just not a commercial success at all. My understanding is just no
What?
one's playing it.
Is that true? I guess I haven't heard much about it, which would imply that that is accurate.
I was gonna say
That's a
that's what
bummer.
I heard as well.
I didn't think that.
I
I
think
don't.
most of it is also just like I feel like it doesn't really matter the time period. I feel like it's just kind of like the game. Like it's a Star Wars game, so everyone's gonna play it presumably. But I feel like there wasn't a latch for some reason, and I think it was poorly received in the fact that like when it first launched, right? Like graphics and glitches and stuff. And I think like I mean I don't take what IGN gives video games or films or TV series as like any sort of actual way to like rank something, but I feel like it is across the board kind of like was panned a bit, and then I could be wrong, but I think it got some updates and ended up doing much better, right? Like it seems like a fun game.
I heard that
Yeah,
they
I
made a lot of
Has some
updates that did
bugs.
improve it quite a bit.
I'm
Yeah.
sure I would like it quite a bit because everything that I've heard is that as a Star Wars game, it's really good, but as a video game, it
Yeah.
kind of sucks because it's a stealth game and you're not
Mhm.
a Jedi, and it's like and now we've had two fantastic Jedi video games, and now it's like, oh, you have to sneak behind this single stormtrooper or else he'll kill you, which is fun for some people if you're into stealth, but like most people who can play Star Wars video games for the Star Wars aspect want to be a Jedi and want to slice up stormtroopers and stuff.
Mhm.
But I heard as a Star Wars fan, there was a lot of great lore explorations and stuff. That time period in between episodes 5 and 6, they did the War of the Bounty Hunters and talked about that. And there was Crimson Dawn was one of the factions that you could work with and against, and that all sounds really interesting. I'm bummed it wasn't received very well, but I guess I'm not surprised as I think about it more. I do still intend to play it one day if I find time.
Well,
There's
maybe
something
it
about
just goes back to our conversation about what a disappointment is, just in general. Maybe Outlaws isn't a bad game at all, but the problem is it's being compared to Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, which, like you said, are just highly received. I mean, everyone in the Star Wars community loves those games, which is nice when there's a
Mhm.
consensus. But I also feel like the games aren't very polarizing. So I feel like if it was good, like it would kind of stand on its own 2 feet and people would be able to recognize it for what it is. But just because it's being compared to those 2 games, people are probably like, yeah, it's not as good. Therefore, they're like, oh, it's disappointing. It's not.
There's something
Yeah,
about Star Wars games that I feel like they still haven't, for me, fully nailed yet. And I think it's because in the Star Wars universe, there's so much opportunity and so many different classes and so many different things to do that I always feel like I love Fallen Order. I think it's a great game. But there's an element that I'm like, you have to be a Jedi the entire time. And I think, which makes sense, I guess, if you pick a Jedi. But I also feel like there's this element where like it almost needs to be like a D&D type game, which I know is like a hard and very tall order. And I feel like they've tried something in like this in the past. But I feel like when you're playing Skyrim, if you can pick your class and the fact of like what you're doing, you can do more magic, right? You can be a mage, you can be a ranger. There's all these different aspects to it, and I feel like it'd be fun and more replayability if you were able to play the same game with roughly the same story, but be able to pick a different class. Like sometimes I hate the Jedi mind tricks in Fallen Order, where I'm like, I'm just not good at this type of game. Where all of a sudden I have to use the Force to push rocks and stuff to build something. I'm like, how much more interesting if you're in the same scenario, but if you're a smuggler. So I feel like it'd be interesting to be able to carve out your own path as your own character loosely, right? Same story, just as like I feel like you could be in the same scenarios but in a different class or a different. And I just feel like there's that element of Star Wars that is missing from a lot of the games, where a lot of the games are like you are a Jedi and this is the story, which is great. But for me as a player, I want to be able to kind of pick and choose how I want to be a Star Wars character. Like you said, like in Outlaws, you're stealthy. That's fun if you choose to do that. But it'd be like, well, it's always the fun scenarios of it. Like, okay, if I'm going to be a Jedi, if I'm like going to actually be a Jedi, you're probably going to sneak through and not kill people. But if you're, the alarms sound off, then you can kind of go ham. And that sounds fun to me in that regard.
there is a good amount of that, to be fair, in Star Wars Outlaws. Like none of us have played it, so I'm not that familiar with it, but I do know that there is a lot of that in terms of replayability and choosing your own destiny. You like gain favorability and reputation with the different factions, and you can choose to take jobs like for the Hutts and against Crimson Dawn, or if you want to do them for Crimson Dawn and against the Hutts, and that'll affect your story and your character as it goes on. So there is that element, but not quite in the same gameplay feature that you're talking about. I don't think. I haven't played it.
Yeah, I think this is the step towards that though, which is good.
I'm not that, I don't have my finger to the pulse of the video game industry, but I do with the Star Wars industry. And I think it's like the same where video games and Star Wars, there's no market for decent. It needs to be exceptional or it's shit. Like movies in general, like you can slap The Rock on a movie and it'll be decent and it'll make $1 billion. And there's a market for a decent movie. And same with, I don't know, but at least movies is like that. And video games are not, which video games make sense because you're going to invest like 10, 20, 30 hours into one video game. It needs to be good. I don't want to do that with a decent game. But Star Wars, it's a little more unfair. Oh, Marvel is the other thing I was going to say. Like, Marvel can make the same movie for 10 years in a row, and everyone will go see it and love it, and it'll make $1 billion every time. But Star Wars and video games don't have that luxury for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Brave New World, I am fully expecting to not be blown away, and I am fully expecting to go see it.
Yeah, same. I'm pretty excited.
I feel like they're gonna. It's one of those things though where I feel like Star Wars might be doing it right in the long run, just for the fact that you don't get complacent and compliant. And that's where I feel like Brave New World is the first movie that I feel like any of us for some reason are excited about, like to go see it potentially. Are you going to see it in theaters as well?
Probably.
I'll try to. I watched Wicked in my basement, and I kind of liked it as much as seeing it in a movie theater, and so I might be more of an at-home movie guy now.
Interesting. But either way, I was going to say like I think it depends on the movie too, because I feel like in the long run, Star Wars will benefit from not having that luxury because you don't get something like Ant-Man, Quantumania or something. I have not seen that, so I don't want to diss it too hard. But
I did see it. It was not
eventually. Good. Okay, so it's one of those things where I feel like eventually it's like, okay, well, thank God we were held to that high of a standard because you don't let things slip through the cracks. I think that's what Star Wars is doing now, is trying to figure that shit out.
Speaking of a high
whenever you
standard,
compare.
has anyone played Knights of the Old Republic?
No, I don't
Like
like
the-
single player games all that much, and old also applies to video
Yeah.
games as it does to movies and TV.
Well, that's a shame.
Back in
I'll
the
have to
day,
go back
yeah,
and play
yeah.
it somehow, just so that we can talk about it intelligently, because I know that that is still to this day
The
very
standard.
highly regarded in the Star Wars community. And I
It's
never played it.
Yeah.
it's on mobile. You can get it for $10 on your phone.
Oh, that's interesting. Does it play well on the phone? What's that like?
That's what I was gonna say. I can't.
Plays as
imagine.
well as it does on the Xbox console from 2001.
I think you can get a mod on your PC as well, and you.
I
Can
mean,
play with
it's also
old
released on
games as
Steam.
well.
You can get it for $10 on your computer.
Yeah,
I have it
that
on
seems-
both, and I have it on the Xbox and on Steam and on my phone. And I've never played more than like 3 hours in any of the formats because I get bored every time.
But if you download it to one more place, maybe it'll really push you to finally play it.
It's on Switch. I could play it in bed a little bit more easily than playing on my phone in bed. You
And
never
still
know.
get the console
Your Kit
experience.
Fisto mask.
That's funny. All right. Well, we already talked about a lot of these, but looking forward to 2025. I mean,
Andor.
maybe quality wise, it'll be better than 2024. But I mean,
Yeah.
quantity wise, it does not look like we're getting a whole bunch. And so I was putting this list together. We have nothing
No.
announced right now for animation other than Visions. But I'm going to put that in a category because that's anime, and I feel like if I call that animated, people get upset about that. There is some sort of difference, is my understanding.
Is there? I think all anime is animated. I think it's like the difference between 2D animation and 3D animation. It's just a different style, but it's all animation, right?
So all anime is
I think
animated, but
so.
not all animation is anime type deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Not in the anime community, so I'll take your word for that. But Star Wars Visions 3, Luke, like you said, is announced already.
Yes.
When was it announced? Well, whatever. I have to do more research on it. I wonder when it was announced in the past, because I'm just now thinking about like surprise announcements like we got for Tales of the Empire, if anything like
There's
that.
for
if
sure going to
possible.
be something. Yeah, there has to be. I think that
But
they're
Luke said,
ramping up.
Luke said Visions is already announced for May 4th or that time area.
It's not.
I think
there's
we're
no
just-
release date, but it'll be
Yeah,
May
it's
4th, based
May
on
4th,
history
yeah.
and the week after Star Wars Celebration in Japan. They're gonna want to show one or two of the episodes there. I think in terms of surprise announcements, we're gonna get a new animated series that'll hopefully be dropping in the fall. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's a little bit optimistic because was it the Bad Batch season 3 that was delayed like 4 different times?
Yeah, it took a long
Yeah.
time for it.
So, it's been a whole year now. I mean, Bad Batch season 3 was coming out last year at this time, so they've had a year of not releasing any or having news about any animated projects. But we all know damn well they're working on them. So hopefully they'll be ready to
Yeah.
announce, and they'll certainly be ready to announce it at Celebration, I'm sure. Hopefully it'll release in 2025. I'm optimistic for that because there's got to be something. There's no way they're gonna go June to December without releasing any on-screen Star Wars. That's what's currently on the slate. There's no chance.
It's possible because the only thing they have is Andor season 2, and I feel like there's a very good chance that they're just like, no, that'll satisfy them. Trust me, Andor season 1 was very well received. They will love season 2. Let's just pump the brakes a little bit because that's the only other thing that we have to look forward to right now. That's what
Yeah,
found
And
I
out.
think there's no way they can surprise us with a movie or a live action TV show
no.
at the end of this year. I think there's definitely going to be an animated show coming out in November or December or something.
Yeah, definitely not as.
What do
far
you guys
as
think it's gonna
releasing
be?
It. I hope it's animated, just because if it's animated, there's a higher chance of it coming out. Because if they announce a new movie or TV show at Celebration for a 2028 release, we talk about it all the time. Might as
Yeah.
well not even say anything at that point.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I don't know, maybe a Mandalorian and Grogu trailer, but I feel like that's also way too early for that if that's not coming out this year either.
They'll have something for that.
So
It started filming.
I do really hope that they're
I
going
could see
to
them
announce some
doing
sort of animation.
same thing with. So do I, but I feel like they can do a Mando and Grogu movie. People, I think this is something I was going to say earlier. Is that like I think Star Wars is also kind of getting hijacked a little bit by people who love the meme or the culture of Grogu, who still call him Baby Yoda and like don't actually know his name or anything, which is fine. You can enjoy Star Wars how you want, but I think that it's kind of infiltrated, and I think that'll get people talking. Plus, think about when the Avengers came out. Like they filmed 2 weeks in Cleveland, and then they were like, "This is a trailer for you all," and it was like, "Oh yeah, that was." And then the movie came out like a year and a half later. Or same thing with Acolyte. Acolyte trailer came out forever. Before it was coming out, they're like, "Hey, get hyped for this." Same thing with Skeleton Crew. I feel like Skeleton Crew and Acolyte were shown at Celebration, and then
Not
not to the
Skeleton
public
Crew.
for
Skeleton Crew.
had 8. Yeah, but
Oh, did it? Because now I
they
can't
had
remember
like a
because we
teaser
yeah
trailer
we
that
didn't
was-
talk about the
yeah.
leaks from actual Celebration. I'm just thinking about how we kept
Yeah.
complaining about how Skeleton Crew was allegedly going to come out in 2 months and we had never seen a trailer or any sort of advertising for it.
Well, but
And we said
that's-
that for like a year.
That's different though. I would fully expect a Celebration panel where they show some early footage from Mandalorian and Grogu, because that's basically what they did with Acolyte at Celebration. But that's different than a trailer, because they tried to keep that under wraps, even though they showed it at Celebration from the Acolyte for so long. So they're gonna show something. I don't know if it'll be an official trailer or maybe it'll be like a what do they call it? Like a sizzle reel, like where they show like the behind the
Yep.
scenes of the making of. They've done that a couple of times too, where they like released them on Disney Plus, and it's like it's not quite a trailer, but you see them filming some scenes. I don't know.
J.J. Abrams just promising it won't be like the prequels. That's what I always think of whenever I hear a sizzle reel from the Force Awakens, released by late 2013. They didn't have any footage, and it was just JJ. I've said this on the podcast before. I don't want to get into it, but he was just like, oh, real sets and real props and real costumes, no CG. It's like, all right, JJ, we like CG now. Get over it.
Yeah. I don't hate the sequel trilogy, but I will say the first mistake that you make is having people make Star Wars who are embarrassed by Star Wars. That's why people love Dave Filoni.
Yeah.
I don't think Dave Filoni necessarily makes the best Star Wars, but I think he loves Star Wars, and I think that love comes through the screen, and I appreciate that. He's the only person who's willing to defend the prequels. There's that famous scene that we've talked about on this podcast 100 times with them sitting around that round table, the creators of Mandalorian, and then Dave Filoni
Yeah.
just randomly goes on that 10-minute spiel all about the Duel of the Fates, and Jon Favreau and Bryce Dallas Howard are just politely nodding along like I have no idea what this guy's talking about right now. But that's the shit that resonates with the fans, because we're like, thank you. You appreciate truly the prequels, unlike these other people who are just being nice and are like, yeah, but we're going to stay away from that. I don't want to touch too much on that. J.J.
Yeah.
Abrams joked about how he wanted to include the bones of Jar Jar in the sands of Jakku. And it's like, that's just a real big middle finger. I don't know. I don't need
Yes.
to go on a tangent about that right now, especially because I feel like this episode is so much more negative than it needs to be. But truly,
I was
No,
thinking
yeah,
that too.
We're excited.
truly, there's a lot
There
of good
was-
stuff coming out. All this was to
There was
say,
a
Andor season 2 is
yeah.
going to be phenomenal.
yeah. Yeah.
What do you guys think the next animated show will be? Because there will be another animated show. I guess maybe it'll be released at Celebrate or announced at Celebration. Maybe not. Maybe it'll come out in 2025. Maybe not. But it will exist one day. What do you think it's going to be? The next big one.
I have no idea. I think it's going to be something original, something new. I don't think we're going to. I think they're going to try to reset like Clone Wars and Rebels a little bit to set people up for something new, and that's what's next. I think is my
So, like, I guess my
Is my
question is, what
theory.
era are you thinking?
era. Okay. Also, I can see them doing a Balin Skull tie-in, just so we
Cool.
have a softer reset on him when we see him again. I could
That'd
see
be
that.
cool.
I don't know if it'll happen. I think that'd be awesome. But I could also, yeah, that's something I could see happening too. So
I would.
I
love
think
that.
it'll be in this era though of the Mandoverse basically. I think is where it would take place.
the post.
When does Ahsoka season 2 start filming? They might have a little bit of footage from that at
I know
Celebration.
it's been
They
radio
might.
silent.
I
Basically,
think
feel
they
like.
just started recently, didn't they?
I think they're starting in February. I don't know if I'm making that up. I think early this year they're starting.
Yeah.
I mean, they recast Balin Skull. That was really the only thing that they had to do before they start shooting.
Yeah.
Dave Filoni was well on his way writing it halfway through season 1.
with the Hound. I was very happy with that recasting. I think they knocked that one out of the park.
Yeah.
But speaking of recasting, my answer to your question would be post Return of the Jedi, animated. But I think we can follow Luke, Han, and Leia. I think we can get more content of them because it's a good workaround where you don't have to de-age any of the actors or anything like that. Harrison Ford doesn't give a shit about Han Solo. Carrie Fisher passed away, and Mark Hamill would probably be willing to use his voice for it. So I feel like it's just kind of ripe for the picking, where it's like we can get more content of these characters without having to worry about the logistics of how we're going to bring them back.
I would have said that 2 weeks ago, but now we have that comic series coming out now in that time frame, and I can't see them doubling up on that. So now I'm trying to differentiate my expectation from my hope, but I genuinely do think my expectation is that it's going to be a sequel era animated show, which is also my hope. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think they're ready to move on from the prequel era. Like the Clone Wars and the clones has been so thoroughly explored, and now
Yeah.
the original trilogy is moving on in comics and the Mandoverse really well. I think the sequel era makes the most sense at this point in time.
Yeah, I hope so.
I would
I
like
think
that.
that's the biggest gap that still needs to be filled because yeah, this prequel era they went back pretty thoroughly and connected a lot of dots, made a lot of things connect, a lot of things make sense, and now they can go back because there's some pretty big holes of like, okay, what exactly happened to Palpatine post Return of the Jedi, where they can kind of start to very slowly make sense of that timeline between Jedi to the Rise of Skywalker. And I think it would only improve the viewing experience because I think, watching Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith is made a million times better having watched the Clone Wars. And I think the same
Mhm.
thing would happen with the sequel trilogy. I think that's only going to get better with age.
That being said, I am sort of brushing up against the exact same thing I just said, where they won't do it because there's a comic series. They're also doing the Legacy of Vader Kylo Ren comic series set in between episodes 8 and 9, which I'm also really looking forward to and I think will be great, but that would be the precise era that I would expect and want an animated series because I don't want to do it before episode 7 because then you can't have Rey or Finn in it, and after episode 9 is muddy. Like that, there's just so much to explore there. I think it would make sense to go like in the middle or before to some extent, but then that's only a year to explore that time, which is narrow, and there's also a comic series in it, but I still think that they can make that work, and that's what I want to see. Like Rey training with Leia, Finn and Poe's friendship develop, and all the adventures that they go on during that time, the Resistance rebuilding and all that.
Mm.
That's my hope.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that.
Same.
And maybe we'll get some more books too, because we have a couple big books announced, which I'm super excited for. Reign of the Empire: The Mask of Fear. It's the first book in a new trilogy by Alexander Freed, all about the politics of the Galactic Senate in its final days. Kind of seeing some of the behind the curtains look of Mon Mothma and everything going on there, which I think is perfect for the book because that's the kind of stuff that I appreciate is like the logistics of like what's really going on here. So I think that'll be really good. I'm excited for that one. I'm excited to listen to it. I'll probably not read it just because we've talked about Alexander Freed in the past. He is a very, very detailed writer. So I think maybe listening to it will be the better choice.
I'm gonna try to read the words. I've been reading more this last 2 weeks. I guess it's not quite a habit yet, but I should be able to finish this High Republic book that I'm on. That book comes out on February 25th, which is just about 3 weeks away as of recording this, and I should be able to finish the book I'm reading now and dive right into that one, and I'm really excited for it. Alex at Star Wars Explained had his review, came out today, and he said it's good, which I was expecting that broad strokes, but it's about like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and Saw Gerrera and their differing ideologies and the way they work together and against each other, and that sounds so good, and I'm really excited for it.
Does it take place pre
I'm
Andor or
glad.
post Andor?
Pre-Andor.
I'm glad you said 2 weeks isn't a habit because I've been doing heroin for about a week and I feel like I was at the cusp.
Yeah, you're fine. Just stop.
That's not addiction yet. You're fine.
Yeah. It's not even a habit. It's just
You can stop anytime. You might as well put it off a few weeks.
Oh boy.
The Acolyte Wayseeker is another book that was announced. It is a book with a tie-in to the Acolyte featuring Vernestra Rowe and Indara, which I'm excited for. I'll give that one a read. Luke, are you excited for that one? Have you heard anything about it?
As much as I love the Acolyte, Vernestra Rowe and Indara were probably my two least favorite characters. I mean, who are they competing with? Who would I have liked less than them? Torben, maybe. So in
Yeah.
terms of
But I think that's probably just due to a lack of content, though. I mean, they were just I mean, Vernestra was hardly in it at all, and Adara was the first one to die. So I don't know. I like their characters. I think this is a good way to kind of get some more content.
I'm much more excited for the Acolyte Yord and Jeki book, which is probably coming out this year, but I noticed it wasn't on your list. But if they announced it, it must be.
I do not have that on my list. I have Sanctuary, a Bad Batch novel, which I also thought was interesting. That they're doing a novel on the Bad Batch.
I feel like all that stuff should have came out, to be honest, in lead up to the ending of the show. It feels weird that it's like almost like an afterthought. Like honestly, like from a sales perspective, what does that look like? Do you think
the Acolyte?
like,
Absolutely, because that was taking place before the Acolyte. Whereas Sanctuary, I don't know much about. That one might be taking place after Bad Batch season 3, which makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, I feel like even still, from a marketing standpoint, like these would be like a good way to push the content. Like when the movies were coming out, they had all these tie-ins of like the journey to the Force Awakens, and like it had like all these comics and books and everything like that. I remember giving way too much credit to those at the time than what I should have, but it was exciting because I was studying them, trying to get any sort of minor detail I could for the upcoming stuff. And yeah,
that's the thing is that I miss that excitement with some things. I wish these books did come out before. Like we would soak these up. Like now they feel like an afterthought a little bit. But like if we had an Acolyte book, I feel like that's something we would read, absorb, and be on the podcast, like review on the podcast, and then be pumped for the show. No,
yeah, and then be speculating as to what we could see.
You can't
with an amazing source like Libby to be able to do that with.
The hype for the movies is already built in. You don't have to worry about a lead-up book not selling well because you know people are excited for the book. The Acolyte was an original story that like Star Wars fans were really excited for, but most people had never heard of the Acolyte, and they certainly wouldn't have heard of a lead up to it. Like you have to release and establish these characters before you start making books about them. No one wants to watch. No one wants to read a book about.
I disagree. Star Wars fans are the only people who were reading the books that were leading into the Force Awakens anyway. I don't think the casual person was reading Aftermath. I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's similar, but just having that tag on top, because they did it with every movie, and it was so generous at times when it said lead up to The Last Jedi, and it was just a book that was coming out in 2017 and had nothing to do with The Last Jedi. That is a discernible marketing tactic that, you know, someone that's not as big of a Star Wars fan, they're like, oh, that movie's coming out soon, I should read this book. They would not feel that way about The Acolyte, and I think they did about The Last Jedi and all the movies.
Yes, that's true. Some of it felt like a cheap marketing tactic. However, I have a feeling the Acolyte Wayseeker will be more related to the Acolyte than Aftermath was to The Force Awakens.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And that's really all that I want, because I remember disappointed watching The Force Awakens because I was like, this has nothing to do with the book that I read.
The Acolyte, the Wayseeker might have a lot more to do with the Acolyte because that is Vernestra, and it might explore her past with Chimere, which would be really interesting. The Crystal Crown is the other book with Yord and Jeki, which will certainly have nothing to do with the Acolyte because, you know, how could it? They meet all those. No, Osha could be in it, I guess. So I stand corrected with that regard because Osha and Yord knew each other, and Jeki. So never mind with that too. I'm sure that'll tie in. But it won't with Yord. But it won't with Chimere, which is what I'm most excited to see the tie-in.
And then some of the High Republic stuff we already talked about. Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. That is the final book, the final novel of the High Republic.
I am not certain that novel and book mean such different things. You mentioned it last week also, and I never said anything. I don't think novel implies adult. I think young adult novel is just as what a novel is. I think a novel is just a book, right?
But I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
So just call it a novel.
A novel or a book, yeah. I think those two words are about the same.
Okay.
Yeah, they're interchangeable, I think.
But yeah, it's the final book in the High Republic series. It's an adult book. It's going to be the third one in this wave. Charles Soule has talked about how
it's weird because now I'm just thinking it's going to be like graphic.
That's fair. I remember having that problem in the beginning of the High Republic. But Charles Soule has talked about how it's going to like involve all the characters and everything and everyone we know from the High Republic, and it's all going to boil down to like it's going to like a funnel, or he described it like a cyclone. It's going to all whirl together and then meet at a singular point, all these characters and all these different plot lines, which is really exciting, especially for the completionist I want to be. Like, it'll probably include all of the middle grade and young adult stuff, which they're already doing a lot more, which I was surprised to see in the last couple adult books. There's a lot of the young adult characters that are now older, that are basically adult characters, and they're in it. And so I'm excited to see how interconnected that one gets and how they manage to wrap up so many plot lines and stuff. I have every confidence that they will, because it was so well thought out from the beginning all the way to the end, but it is a staggering amount of content to get through.
And then the comics, we already talked about some of them. The Star Wars 2025 series will take place post Return of the Jedi. Legacy of Vader follows Kylo Ren. It will take place between episodes 8 and 9, and Jedi Knights is coming out as well, which is going to be, I guess, an anthology comic series highlighting different Jedi in each issue. And I think, Luke, you said each one is going to have 2 Jedi, and one of them is going to be
Yes.
Count Dooku and Yaddle, which will definitely add another layer to that relationship.
Yeah, so the era is pre-Phantom Menace, which disappointed me because that makes it less likely, although not guaranteed, that Kit Fisto will be in it. Let's go ahead and canonize his age. He can be a Padawan, he can be old, or he can be like a long. Nautalans can be long-lifed. I don't care. Let's get him in here. Make him a baby. Got to get him from his parents or something. Let's get some Kit Fisto content. This is my best chance for it this year.
The through arc is just recruiting Kit Fisto to the Jedi Order as a 3-year-old. And then Star Wars Celebration, like we said, is also coming out. So excited to see some of the announcements to come out of there. I was going to ask you guys what predictions you have coming out of Star Wars Celebration, but I think we basically already covered that. Anything else you wanted to say about predictions or anything else for 2025?
I think we
it'll
will
be
get
a good year.
I think we'll get an Ahsoka season 2 trailer at Celebration.
Mm.
I was on the fence about that a couple minutes ago, but I'm on board for that. I think it's gonna happen.
You think we'll get both that and Mandalorian and Grogu? Because I feel like you're not going to get
Yeah.
just Ahsoka and not Mando Grogu. Like, they're definitely more likely to have
No.
that one, if any of them.
There's definitely a
They're gonna pack
Mando
the
and Grogu
punches.
trailer.
I agree.
I hope that they don't announce any more movies, because I am sick and tired of hearing about all these movies that'll never get made.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll give us an update though on the progress of what they're doing.
No,
Yeah.
don't even do that. Just don't talk about it. Take another year. Get a trailer
No,
before you
No,
speak to
I'd
me
appreciate
again.
them coming back to be like, yeah, we're circling
And-
around to Patty Jenkins. We're gonna
Yeah.
talk about Rogue Squadron one more time.
No, if they'd be nice to be like, oh, here's the Rey movie, here's the panel, because we're officially going into production, something like that. That'd be great.
The only way that I would want to see that is if Kathleen Kennedy is out there talking about the movies, and then Ryan Johnson jumps off of a ladder and whatever that WWE moves, drops the elbow on her, and he's like, "I'm back and I'm making my trilogy," and that's how they announce that.
More theatrics in general. Well, yeah. All right. Well, does anyone have any force for thought? I do have a force for thought.
Hey,
so
excellent.
this one came during my rewatch of the Clone Wars. It was an episode where General Grievous was escaping the clones and the Jedi, and he was flying away on a ship, like on a cable, and he was just kind of like, being dragged behind the ship while having a lightsaber in his hand, and he was deflecting blaster bolts as he was going away. And I'm thinking, and I'm like,
That's so
General
badass.
Grievous is able to deflect blaster bolts? Because in my head, I'm like, I always kind of thought that was a force ability, but I guess that's more of like a skill thing. And then the more I thought about it, I have a theory that lightsabers are like magnets to energy, and that they absorb energy. And there's a couple reasons why. I remember watching a video a long time ago about somebody discussing lightsabers in real life, and they said one of the problems with lightsabers in real life is that lasers go on forever. Like, they don't stop. Like, you need something to limit them, to stop it from extending on forever. So maybe these lightsabers have that technology where they just limit the energy by trying to like suck it back into the handle a little bit. And that's why I believe in canon you can actually extend the length of the blade a little bit, not some of these handles. And so it has this component that kind of like sucks the energy to it a little bit. And that's why Jedi are so easily able to deflect blaster bolts, and why some non-Jedi can also have that ability if they practice. And then the last reason I kind of put this together too is just watching Force lightning and lightsabers interact, because if you tell me that's not just like a magnet right there, then I don't know what to tell you, because all Obi-Wan does is just stick his lightsaber straight up and all the Force lightning just goes right to it. So I don't know how else you explain that other than lightsabers are energy magnets.
I like that theory. I'm down with energy
too.
magnets. I don't remember the scene in the Clone Wars as well as I want to. So General Grievous is flying away on this ship, being pulled by this ship, and the clones are shooting at him in the same direction that he's going. So, like, in my mind, where I thought you were going was at first, like, General Grievous is starting to go really, really fast because it's in space. And so he, like, the speed of the blasters relative to him are only at, like, 0.5 or 0.2 or, like, 0.1 times speed because he's also going away. And so then it's just, you know, like hitting a baseball. It's pretty easy.
That's interesting. How
I'd have to rewatch the
far-
scene. He'd have to be going fast.
Yeah, he'd have to be booking it. But how far do these blaster bolts go on for? Do they go on forever, or do they just kind of like dissipate after a certain length?
I believe Alexander Friedis talked about how they dissipate in the Aftermath or the Alphabet Squadron books.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because that raises an interesting physics question. You know, if a blaster bolt is traveling in this direction at so many miles per hour, and you're also traveling in the same direction, a little bit less.
I'm gonna go watch some videos now.
That's interesting.
See what anyone else says.
But anyway, yeah, so that's my theory. Lightsabers are energy magnets. But let me know what you think. If you disagree or if you agree, or what you thought of 2024, 2025 in Star Wars. You can reach out to us.
It really delegitimizes how well I respect all the Jedi now. I'm going to be watching it, and it's like when I'm, you know, Monday morning quarterback, or Monday quarterback on my couch eating potato chips, like, oh, I could do that. I'm like, yeah, I could probably do this too if I had a magnet sword that just caught all the bullets for me.
For some of the Jedi, like Yoda, you're like, actually, he just has a better lightsaber than the other guys. It's actually not a skill thing at all. His lightsaber is just OP because his blade is shorter. That's how you know the magnet is stronger.
That's actually how it works in Harry Potter, though, and that's why Harry Potter's dumb.
Okay, all right.
That's, what?
Yeah, there's
wands?
good wands and bad wands.
I mean,
what?
not-
The Elder Wand is not the most powerful wand in the world, and that's why he's able to kill everyone?
Yeah, but it's it's also circumstance as well. So it's because there's only been once. Has there been the same exact hair through both wands, which is why it's so powerful. So there's it's the Elder Wand and Harry's wand, and that's why it's so powerful. Is that why? It was also a bad wand in the fact that like you can steal a wand from somebody. It's just not. That's why the wand picks you. Yeah, I could. If Max had a wand, I could use his, but it just wouldn't work as well for me. So that's then therefore it'd be a bad wand. And also imagine like I imagine sometimes it's like a pencil or something. It's like how many pencils do you lose all the time? And someone else is using it. You don't know where that went. I feel like it's the same thing with wands. Unfortunately, a lot of the time too. So you have to find another wand that picks you then.
But doesn't Dumbledore use the Elder Wand, and that's why he's so powerful?
I mean, the Elder Wand is powerful, but he also is a powerful wizard. Yes.
But the Elder Wand is powerful.
In his hands, correct. Yes, it is.
But wouldn't it be powerful in someone else's hands also?
Not as powerful. It doesn't work in Voldemort's hand.
But it would be more powerful.
Did you watch the movies?
Not in a long time, and only once.
We'll work on the table to do a whole episode.
I accidentally stopped recording like 5 minutes ago, but I am glad that I did because you guys just sound like nerds. No.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on socials.
Thanks, Amy.